Nights on the vehicle checkpoint outside the regional hospital were turning into a real drag. The city had been liberated 2 months ago, and the insurgency driven out. The majority of attacks were now skirmishes on the outskirts of town. The key roads leading into the city had been destroyed by the orbital kinetic bombardment system, leaving massive craters where key roads had once existed. Now there were only 3 heavily guarded choke points accessible to vehicle traffic, which the enemy would need to capture if they had any hope of taking the city. Displaced persons still streamed through the cratered mess, many with injury and illness from their long journey across the war-torn country, so the hospital was operating at overcapacity. So whilst there was a steady stream of comings and goings, the people seeking the services of the hospital were relieved for the relative safety within the city and content to wait, as their needs were triaged, and they were told to wait until they could be seen to. With the hospital separated from the closest access road by nearly 50 kilometers of sprawling urban slum, there was little chance of anything eventful occurring tonight, or any of the following nights on Corporal Adam Jacobson's deployment. With the large number of people being forced to enter the city on foot, vehicle traffic was also minimal. The few vehicles his team did have to search were usually trucks delivering crucial supplies. There was sometimes the odd private vehicle. A non-government organization had acquired a small fleet of self-drive capable vehicles and were using them to shuttle the most critical refugees to the hospital. But with the trip to and from taking longer by vehicle than on foot through the resulting slums, these visits were infrequent. Adam looked out over the dimly lit city street. There was a dispersed crowd of people making their way towards the hospital, heading towards the pedestrian entry. The shine of a car's headlights danced around the corner and dazzled Adam for a second, as it caught him at the right angle. The Mark IV vehicle disabling system mounted behind concrete barriers to his left began to track the vehicle and feed back information to Adam's heads-up display on his ballistic goggles. Driver, none. Registration expired 18 June 2035. Owner, Mr. Albert Launceston. Error, deceased. Mass, dry 1,044 kilograms. Suspected load, 1,100 kilograms. Sending universal vehicle slow signal. Error, rejected. Attempting manufacturer override. Error, rejected. Warning, spectroscopic analysis indicated possible nitrate compounds. Recommend swab for explosives. Passengers detected, none. Warning, vehicle speed increasing. The sharp whine of electric motors was suddenly overpowered as the vehicle's supplementary ethanol combustion engine kicked on. The vehicle lurched forward on its sagging suspension. Private Carlson, zap the tires. Adam ordered to the Mark IV operator. An orange confirmation light came into view on Adam's HUD. He looked at it and blinked twice to confirm the Mark IV non-lethal activation. The Mark IV's laser radiation warning light flashed yellow. A faint purple glow was visible as the Mark IV's ultraviolet laser exposed the vehicle's tires to a century's worth of sun exposure in milliseconds. The Mark IV quickly jerked from side to side as it targeted each tire. The rubber duplicate flew off the tires, but the vehicle only slowed slightly. A zoomed-in view from the checkpoint's cameras appeared on Adam's HUD. The vehicle was now bounding along on concreted rims as it tore up the asphalt, its tire cavities apparently having been filled with the stuff. Adam quickly cycled through the remaining disabling options he had left. He could switch the Mark IV's radiation to microwaves and boil away its engine's coolant and hope it seized, but there was the potential he'd ignite its ethanol fuel tank. He'd have to risk kinetic. After a quick series of practiced menu authorizations, the Mark IV's warning light flashed red. A warning tone blurted before a sharp crack rang out as it loosed a single, solid tungsten slug the size of Adam's fist from its supplementary railgun. The round's placement was calculated to have a 98% disablement probability. The Mark IV had known the critical points of the vehicle from the moment its cameras selectively deciphered its image, and its processors intelligently matched it, though its machine learning algorithm to its manufacturer's data. The round struck and destroyed the car's CPU. It did not slow. Almost instantly, the Mark IV recognized this and requested permission to fire at consecutive vulnerabilities at will. This decision from Corporal Jacobson took what seemed an age to its optimized processing cycles, during which the Mark IV developed firing solutions to disable the vehicle's main electrical power coupling and mechanical driveshaft, actions that would disable the vehicle with minimal risk of fire or explosion. After several billion cycles, the approval came. Adam's wetware was still processing the results of the Mark IV's requests. Its first round had failed to disable the vehicle despite reporting its CPU destroyed. Its hypersonic spherical round designed to disable protected military vehicles had ripped a dinner plate-sized hole in the car's fragile chassis and continued careening down the street, out of sight. The next two had had more local effects. One had lodged itself in a public hydrogen refueling station, and the other had bounced off the road and collided with the windows of a nearby high-rise, sending a shower of glass onto some passerbys below. They had taken cover where they could, but Adam could see one woman staring at a large gash in her leg as the surrounding tissue started to trickle blood. Then there was also the vehicle suspected to be laden with explosives now motionless in the street, having rolled to a stop 50 meters away from the checkpoint, its engines screaming madly as whatever contingent processor that controlled it failed to comprehend the severed drive shaft. Multiple situations and only a handful of soldiers to deal with it. Adam then noticed a faint green light pulsing on his HUD, indicating a message from command. He quickly opened it to view its contents. In the hardened command center, deep underground, in an undisclosed location, Lieutenant Andre Mickelham had been watching the events at Corporal Jacobson's checkpoint unfold. As she was doing this, her assigned assistive, AI, was generating its own response plan to the situation. From her initial appointment, Andre's training had been focused on decision-making. She had no dedicated team, no set unit, and no specific allegiance to any particular corps. But her training was focused towards tactical combat decisions, and her one job boiled down to reviewing information, making a decision, and checking this against the smart AI that had been working alongside her since her appointment. The goal of this relationship was to emulate the assigned human's decision-making cycle into a reproducible form. A form that didn't have to sleep. A form that wasn't affected by emotion, could never become angry or overwhelmed. Andre's AI had almost succeeded in replicating her decision-making cycle perfectly. Very rarely was there alternate outcomes from her analysis to its own. Reviewing the data of Corporal Jacobson's situation, she did not know if this event was happening now, in the past, or was entirely fabricated for the learning experience. The outcome would be the same: development of orders to deal with the situation. After a few seconds of review of her and her AI's orders, and noting no major dissimilarities, she approved them for distribution. The only feedback she'd get was whether or not a successful outcome had been achieved at the end of her shift. In the meantime, though, another situation had already presented itself, and her AI was already chugging away to a solution. Not wanting to give it any more of a head start, she dived in herself. Corporal Jacobson skimmed the orders. Little bite-sized pieces that would help him deal with the reality he was facing now. An explosive ordnance disposal team was on the way, with deployable barriers to channel any resulting blast upwards. Priority now was for the clearance of civilians from the suspected blast zone, which was his job as the current unit on the scene. Adam rallied his team. Abrahams, Udesky, and Carlson maintained security here at the checkpoint. Everyone else on me for casualty care. Adam and his detail moved over to the woman with the injured leg. His body camera sent her image to the national database and quickly discerned her identity. Details regarding her medical history were made available. She had no allergies or underlying conditions. The injury was large but not deep. A snap bandage was applied, automatically tightening around the wound to an appropriate pressure. More intensive wound care would be conducted once she was clear of the danger area. Looking back towards the hospital, Adam could see the approaching red and blue lights of a triage cart approaching the checkpoint. They assisted the woman to walk over to the autonomous cart. As they were helping her get in, 22 engineering regiments' deployable explosive containment barriers rounded the bend and positioned themselves around the vehicle. They began to pump their created seclusion zone full of their explosive neutralization compound. The vicious liquid would slowly seep into every crevice of the vehicle and render any explosive safe. Its byproduct was a lot of heat, as the energy in the chemical bonds of the explosives was slowly released as they broke down. The vehicle would be nothing but a pile of slag by the end of it, and the road would likely need resurfacing after cleanup, but it was much safer than a controlled detonation. Adam ticked off the tasks in his orders, and they faded slowly from his view after turning green. Back to a quiet night on the checkpoint.